case of paranoid schizophrenia with grandiose delusions. The old man was living in a fantasy world of his own creation, fueled by auditory hallucinations. He was a danger to himself, living in a basement filled with flammable materials. Yet, a small, irrational part of Sinclair's mind remembered the precision of the machine, the strange comfort it seemed to bring, and the sheer, harmless joy in Edgar's eyes. The door to his office opened, and Cynthia walked in, accompanied by 2 orderly guards from the county psychiatric facility. "Dr. Sinclair," Cynthia said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "Is it done?" Sinclair looked at the papers, then at the pen in his hand. He sighed, a deep, heavy sound. "Yes," he said, "I have signed the observation order. It is just for 3 days. Just so we can evaluate him in a controlled environment." "Thank you, Doctor," Cynthia said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "It is for his own good." 2 hours later, Dr. Sinclair stood in the basement of the apartment building, watching as the 2 orderlies gently guided Edgar Witherspoon toward the stairs. Edgar was not fighting them, but his face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. "Cynthia, don't do this to me," Edgar pleaded, looking at his niece. "Uncle Edgar, please," Cynthia said, her voice breaking. "It is just for 3 days while they observe you. It is too long." Edgar cried out, his voice echoing in the concrete corridor. "It has to be maintained, kept in balance." "Mr. Witherspoon," Dr. Sinclair said, stepping forward. "You hear voices. That is not normal. You must understand that." Edgar stopped, turning his bright blue eyes on the psychiatrist. "You hear voices too," he said. "No," Sinclair replied gently. "Healthy people do not hear voices. You hear mine, don't you?" Edgar asked. "That is not the same thing," Sinclair said, momentarily taken aback. "Why?" Edgar demanded. "What is the difference between a sane man hearing a crazy voice and a crazy man hearing a sane voice? Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. You don't understand the risk you are taking, Dr. Sinclair." The orderlies began to lead him up the stairs. Edgar looked back one last time, his eyes filled with a desperate, warning light. "I knew it," Edgar whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "There goes Tatoa." Dr. Sinclair frowned. "What is Tatoa?" he asked. "A tiny island in the South Pacific," Edgar said, his voice fading as they reached the top of the stairs. "What time is it, Doctor?" Sinclair looked at his wristwatch. "It is 3:17, he said. At 3:17 in the afternoon, Edgar's voice came back down the stairwell, cold and hollow. "Tatoa became history because of you." Sinclair stood in the quiet hallway, the words chilling him to the bone. He shook his head, trying to clear the irrational fear. It was a delusion, a classic delusion of grandeur. He walked to the door of Edgar's apartment. Mrs. Milligan was standing there, holding a large ring of keys and a box of heavy-duty black trash bags. "Please, Doctor," Sinclair said, turning to her. "Weather is still time. It will take me days to clean up this junk. Keep her away from it. Remember Tatoa," Sinclair muttered to himself as he walked away, the words repeating in his mind like a dark mantra. Chapter 6. The Tidal Wave. Dr. Sinclair sat in his office, the quietness of the room now feeling heavy, almost oppressive. He tried to read a medical journal, but the words swam before his eyes. He kept thinking about Edgar's face, the desperate warning in his voice, and the strange, mathematical beauty of the machine in the basement. It was a classic case, he told himself. A tired man, feeling useless in his retirement, who had created, his hand resting on the brass doorknob. "She is a very nice woman," he said, turning to look at Sinclair. "So tell her not to worry. See? A simple solution. Thanks for coming, Doctor. It has been a pleasure meeting you." "But Mr. Witherspoon," Sinclair said, trying to keep the door from closing. "I would like to talk to you about your work." Edgar paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "My work? I bet you would like to know what it is, wouldn't you?" "Yes," Sinclair admitted. Wrong answer, Edgar said with a mischievous grin. You see a doll's head here anywhere? Dr. Sinclair looked around the cluttered hallway. You mean like that? He asked, pointing to a small cardboard box near the boiler room. Edgar scuttled over, picked up a plastic doll's head, and examined it with the critical eye of a diamond merchant. Ah, too big, he sighed, tossing it back into the box. Also brunette. I need blonde, and I need it in 5 minutes. And what for, if I may ask? Sinclair inquired, genuinely curious. Edgar looked at him as if Sinclair had just asked why the sun rose in the east. You want Santa Barbara to fall into the ocean? He asked. Then stand aside, sir. Stand aside. Before Sinclair could process the strange question, Edgar dashed past him, grabbed a small, dirty blonde doll's head from the top of a dusty fuse box, and let out a victorious cry. Woohoo! He shouted, holding the tiny plastic object aloft. Just in the nick of time. No time to lose. Mr. Witherspoon, please, Sinclair said, following him to the door of his apartment. Edgar stopped at the threshold, suddenly looking apologetic. I'm sorry, he said, his voice softening. I should not be rude. You have come all this way to see me. May I come in? Sinclair asked. And it was so nice, a pleasure meeting you, Edgar continued, as if Sinclair had not spoken. Tell my niece hello. Now, if you will excuse me, I have got to stop the shaking in Santa Barbara. With those words, Edgar stepped inside his apartment. But before the door clicked shut, he reached his hand out, holding a small cardboard box filled with old newspapers. Mr. Witherspoon, Sinclair started. On your way out, could you dump this? Edgar asked cheerfully, handing the box to the astonished psychiatrist. The door clicked shut, and the lock turned with a decisive, metallic snap. Dr. Sinclair stood in the dim basement corridor, holding a box of trash, utterly bewildered. Chapter 3. The Weight of Concern. Later that afternoon, Dr. Sinclair sat in his office, staring at the empty space on his desk where his neat stacks of files usually resided. The encounter with Edgar Witherspoon had left him feeling unusually unsettled. There was an innocence to the old man, a sparkling clarity in his eyes that did not align with the typical dark recesses of senile dementia or schizophrenia. The telephone on his desk rang, breaking his train of thought. He answered it. Good afternoon, Doctor. Cynthia's voice came through the receiver, tight with anticipation. Did you see Uncle Edgar? Yes, this morning, Sinclair replied. Well? She asked. I could not exactly call it a long conversation, Sinclair admitted, rubbing his temple. But it was long enough to realize that he is absolutely out of his mind. Cynthia finished the sentence for him. On the other hand, Sinclair said, trying to remain objective, Mr. Witherspoon appears happy and like harmless. Harmless? Cynthia's voice rose in pitch. Doctor, he pesters strangers on the street. He runs after garbage trucks. That is far from harmless. Somebody saw him take a baby's bottle out of its carriage just yesterday. I am afraid he will get arrested next time. Doctor, I will sign anything. I will cooperate in any way I can to get him the help he needs. If we need to commit him for observation, I will do it. Sinclair hesitated. Commitment was a serious step, one he did not take lightly. All right, he said slowly. Maybe I will have another chat with him. A longer one. See if I can understand the nature of his delusions. Did you hear that? What? Cynthia asked. Sinclair paused. For a brief second, he thought he had heard a faint, rhythmic humming sound, like a massive clockwork mechanism ticking somewhere just out of earshot. But his office was silent. Sorry, it was nothing, Sinclair said. I don't know what I was thinking. I will call you as soon as I can. Thank you very much, Doctor, Cynthia said, and the line went dead. Sinclair hung up the receiver and turned on the small radio that sat on the corner of his desk. He liked to keep the volume low, letting the soft murmur of the news provide a background to his thoughts. Activity could be a problem, the radio announcer's voice droned. Acid rain is affecting the northern lake.